Well, good afternoon, Club 17, and welcome to our, believe it or not, it's our 8th virtual meeting so far. So today we're really excited to have Dick Williams, who's the Reds president of baseball operations, with us. And he's going to give us a full report on the 2020 team and all the things that are going on within the baseball world today. So Dick, I really appreciate you taking the time, especially knowing that you're very, very busy prepping for the season ahead.
Dave, thanks for having me. It's great to be talking baseball. As you can imagine, I'm not getting enough opportunities to do that with the outside world these days. We are spending a lot of time behind closed doors getting ready for what we hope will be a partial season, an exciting one. But it's exciting to be out here talking, and this is a great group to spend some time with.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. And so what we'll do, I'm gonna go ahead and introduce Dick, and then we'll get into some Q&A and enjoy that part of the process, and then wrap up the meeting with some Rotary Club announcements. So to introduce Dick, Dick Williams is a graduate of the University of Virginia, and after college actually was an investment banker. So he then served on the George W. Bush 2004 presidential re-election campaign before joining the Reds in 2006. As part of the group that took over the management of the team with the majority owner of Bob Castellini and his group. So Dick has had several different roles within the Reds. He initially became vice president of baseball operations, and then was named vice president and assistant general manager in November of 2014. And later he was promoted to senior vice president and general manager, working under Walt Jocketty, who was then the Reds president of baseball operations. And finally, he was named the president of baseball operations on December 27th of 2016. So the Williams family also has a huge heritage with the Reds as well, dating back over 50 years. And Dick's grandfather, William Sr., and a great uncle James were key members of a ownership group that acquired the Reds in 1966, believe it or not. So they were obviously part of the domination of the big Reds machine in the early 70s as well. And they became majority owners of the Reds in 1980, and then sold the controlling interest to Marge Schott in December of 1984. And Dick's father, Joe, and his uncle Thomas are also currently minority shareholders. And Joe is the club's board chairman, and Tom is the vice chairman and treasurer. So please give a warm Rotary welcome to Dick Williams.
Dave, thanks for having me. Thanks for that intro. I'm extremely proud of the fact that I grew up in Cincinnati, grew up a Reds fan, grew up around the Reds, and have the opportunity to work here. I think we're the only team in baseball where the owner, the general manager or president, and the field manager, all three grew up in the hometown, in the town that their team they're working for. So pretty special. I grew up around baseball, as you said, but never thought that I would have the opportunity to be in this position. I was a fan first and foremost, and that's how I grew up. Part of my bio you left out was in 1990 when I was away at college and the Reds had their magical run. I came home for that NLCS against the Pirates. And when they won the game to clinch to go to the World Series, I jumped onto the field. I was so excited, ran out to celebrate with the team. I thought the whole city was coming with me, but they didn't. And I ended up getting escorted by a nice police officer over to the side, and got to watch the celebration from the dugout. But I came back for games 1 and 2 when we beat Oakland, and those are some of the highlights of my childhood. People ask me about what I did to get into baseball, and it helped having that family connection. But I always told them don't necessarily follow what I did, which is a lot of, as you said, finance and investment banking. About 10, 15 years there. That is becoming now a much more common background for people in my profession. But when I got into it, it was pretty unusual. And so I was telling people don't follow my path, but maybe now it makes a little more sense.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your role. Speaking of that, so what does a president of baseball operations do on a day-to-day basis? And the list goes on and on, I'm sure.
Well, I think the most common misconception maybe or thing that people don't realize is they think first of the major league team, and that is, of course, my primary responsibility and the most important part of what I do. But it is a small part of what I do. So I think of that as a department headed by our field manager, David Bell. I also think of our major league front office operations here in Cincinnati with Nick Kroll, who I've hired as the GM, as a separate department. But then we have kind of all the feeder groups that come up to that group. So we have a big amateur scouting department. Our director is headquartered here in Cincinnati, but we have amateur scouts, full-time and part-time, all over the country and all over the world. And one of the things I did when I took over was expanded our scouting presence beyond Latin America and the United States, but into Europe and more expansively into Asia, which is a market we're real excited about, and we've it's paid dividends this year in our ability to sign Shogo. But we're now in Japan and Taiwan and Korea, where some of those developed professional leagues are internationally. Beyond amateur scouting, we then have our player development department, which is 8 minor league teams, all the way from AAA, AA, high A, low A, rookie ball. We have teams that play in the rookie leagues out in Arizona. We have teams that play down in the Dominican Republic. So we have hundreds of minor league players coming up through our system that we coach and are trying to get to the big leagues. Then we've got a pro scouting department, which is the department that scouts other organizations, minor league and major league players. So we scout both minor and major league players. And now we have a newly created health and performance department that I'm real excited about. That a lot of teams have strength and conditioning, trainers, areas like that. We've added to that with mental health, wellness, cultural assimilation, departments that really are helping these players become well-rounded individuals. Diet, nutrition has become a big focus for us. So I brought a guy in from the Giants. He's going to be headquartered in Cincinnati. He lives in Arizona now, but he will coordinate all the work of those departments so that we make sure our players are getting a coordinated approach to their health and wellness. So now the strength coach is speaking to the nutritionist, who is speaking to the trainer, who's speaking to the mental skills coach that's working with that player. So it's a coordinated approach to their overall well-being, and we've already seen some great dividends from that work. So that's a taste of some of the departments behind the scenes that go into building the major league team success.
Sounds like you've been very busy the last 2 or 3 years.
We've done an incredible amount of reshuffling in all of those departments that I mentioned: player development, amateur and pro scouting, our international department, major league team, front office. We have new department heads. So it's been a lot of hiring good people, restructuring the way we work, the way we talk, the way we communicate, and feel real good about where we are. We couldn't have been more excited than we were going into this season.
Sounds good. Well, tell me a little bit about, you hear a lot about data analytics, and you hear about how interesting that is and how that supports all sports teams now. How do the Reds actually use data analytics to manage maybe even scouting, whether it's new players or opponents?
It touches everything we do. It's probably the single fastest growing department we've had. A guy by the name of Sam Grossman, his title's assistant general manager, really started and grew the analytics department from 1 or 2 people up to we're in the mid-teens now, and it touches our major league coaching staff. We put together a tremendous amount of advanced work on the opponents for every series that we have during the regular season. 95% of that is analytically produced. It's combined with scouting reports. It's combined with the coach input, player input. But the technology now is amazing, what they can pull up on a player and how they dissect player performance and how we should attack an opponent. In the draft, amateur draft even, we do a lot of analytical work now. Because of the advances in technology, we're able to acquire a lot of biomechanical information on players that we weren't before. And this goes into the scouting process. So we're able to really identify things that we think are important, capture those remotely, and then apply those into the process. But probably the biggest growing and most exciting area that we've got has been analytics. And what I love about it is our scouting department is totally on board and embraces their work, because the way we look at it is we'll never replace the eyes of a scout. The scout's going to see things subjective things that a lot of the data capture devices don't pick up. We like to marry that with the data capture devices, whether that's as simple as a radar gun or that's something like a biomechanical device or some of the edgetronics, some of the high speed, high definition cameras you saw us use in spring training. And the scouts get excited because it's those little things they were always able to see that you and I weren't able to pick up. The scouts have a really good instincts, and they're seeing things with their mind's eye that the average person doesn't pick up. And now the data devices are really backing up a lot of what they saw, and so they're pretty excited about some of the things we're making available to them.
Let's talk a little bit about the Reds payroll real quick, and not so much about how it's made up. We'll get into some player commentary here in a little bit, but I did a little bit of research, and you know, our Reds payroll, I think, is about $140 million this year, and it was about $100 million just 2 years ago. So, which is a huge increase. So tell us how the Reds determines what their budget is, and that whole process. It's got to be a very delicate conversation, I would think.
It is. We work closely with ownership. We've got a very supportive ownership group. As Bob, most of Cincinnati knows Bob Castellini, knows his background. He bought the team to win. He's been very aggressive about putting as much of the payroll, as much of the company's resources into the Major League payroll as possible. There's a delicate balance there. There were a few years where we tried to invest as much of those company resources as we could in advancing our analytics department, advancing our technology, acquiring amateur players. And so for a few years there, our Major League payroll was a little lower relative to the other 30 teams. Now we're pushing again on the gas pedal this year, signing free agents. It's certainly something you want to try to time. You know, when you see the opportunity, you want to go for it. You want to add players from the outside. But we've never really gone through the phase that I think some of the other teams have, where they've pulled their payroll back by extreme amounts, almost to the point where they're conceding the season. You've seen teams do that strategy for multiple years, and the effect that has on a fan base, you know, we just don't think that's fair or that's right. We think we can achieve some of the same goals without going to those extremes. So while you saw us for a few years with a slightly lower payroll, we were still doing a lot of things, drafting high, making trades to build for a window of success, and we think that window's here.
Well, Cincinnati's known as a small market team, so to speak, and it's difficult to compete with the payrolls of LA and the Yankees and the Red Sox and so forth. But I think Kansas City's been the only World Series winner that's been a small market team in the last 10 to 15 years. So how do we compete on a sustainable basis as a small market team?
It's tough. And I can tell you, the Yankees and Red Sox don't have any sympathy for us. It's that's part of the challenge. That's what we love about the job, is feeling a little bit like the underdog, feeling like we're doing it for our city that we're so proud of. I don't see any big rule changes coming anytime soon that are going to dramatically change the playing field, but they have done things to certainly with a nod to the small markets. They've given us some extra picks in the draft after the first and second rounds scattered in there. They've made some slight concessions of when you lose big dollar free agents that you can't afford to keep. There are ways to try to recoup some of that value for the small market team. So there's a few things they've done. I don't think we'll ever get to a model where all the teams are completely equal. And many would argue, that probably isn't the right way to go anyways. But I do think there are things we can try to do better than the other teams. And that's the way we build the way we hire people, the way we build our processes, the communication we have internally. We just want to build the best engine we can build, and the rest will take care of itself.
Well, I want to make a promise to you. I don't want to talk too much about the pandemic today, because I think we've all have enough of that in our daily lives, but it certainly does affect what you do on a daily basis. So tell us how you've had to plan, replan, reschedule, et cetera, through all this pandemic, because it certainly has affected everything from spring training on.
We were only 2 weeks from opening day when it really became apparent that they were going to shut down the complexes. So I just pulled out my pandemic playbook and started reading what to do next. Isn't that what everybody was able to do? um, it happened quickly. I remember being in spring training, getting about halfway through, and starting to read about what was happening with coronavirus. We were very aggressive in terms of the steps we took at our complex. We were one of the most restrictive. In fact, for the first few days, MLB called us and said, you got to let more things happen. You got to let players be players. You got to let all this work go on at your complex. And we were saying, we're afraid for their health and safety, and we want to clean things up, and we want to restrict their access right now until we get a better handle on this. And that tune changed pretty quickly. Within a couple of days, MLB was saying the same things we had been, which is it's not the right time to have players in the complexes. But that escalated extremely quickly, and we came back to Cincinnati mid-March. And the day after I got back, I found out the guy that had been running our facility out there had tested positive right after we left, and he had interaction with a lot of people. And I think it's a real credit to what we were doing at the complex, the fact that we never had another positive test in the organization, because we have a very small facility out there. His office is right off the lobby. Almost everybody that comes in and out of the complex has some interaction with him. All the different department heads, he's up on their second floor frequently. And so to contain it, really speaks to how aggressive we were about the protocols we were following. So I felt really good about that. He's doing much better now. But we've been rolling with the information, and a lot of it comes out publicly. At the same time I'm getting it. I'll hear from people that they read something on the internet, and I'll say, well, I haven't necessarily heard that from MLB yet, and then I might hear it later that day or next day. So it's been a challenge for MLB and the players union to get together, get everything figured out without it's sort of being debated in the court of public opinion. I think so many people are interested in what's happening, but we're pretty used to that. It happens to me when I'm trying to do a trade or sign a free agent. A lot of times I'll read about it in the press before I've had before the deals happen. That's just the nature of our social media these days. So it's been an exciting process. It's tested our team. I think if anything, we're going to come out of this stronger than before. I'm so thankful that we put the leadership group in place that we did the last few years. I mentioned all those new department heads. We spent a lot of time on the softer side of managing an organization, retreats to build trust amongst each other. And I don't hear a lot of baseball teams, talking about that, but organizations, like all the audience we have today, they understand the importance of that, and we prioritize that. And I'm grateful that we did, because it's enabled us to get through this trying time. I mean, we're dealing with all the same economic issues that all small and big businesses are dealing with right now. And so we're make some really tough decisions. And the fact that we're able to have honest conversations with each other and make quick decisions has really helped.
So, what is the latest crystal ball on when the season will begin? What's MLB saying at this point in time, and maybe what conditions do you think would be?
Well, we're all very hopeful that everything gets worked out, and we're running out of time to really get those decisions made in order to have what we consider to be a productive major league season. We're in May right now. I would think that an agreement by the end of this month, within the next 10 days, 2 weeks, is almost essential in order to have a spring training, a modified spring training in June. Our players would need at least 3 weeks, 4 weeks to get ready. We could possibly do that without opponents and fans. We could train by ourselves. We may be given the option to do a spring training in our home ballpark. That hasn't been finalized yet, but that's something we would probably consider given the weather in Arizona right now. That'd be a first for us to prepare for a season in Cincinnati. But the goal being to play in July, August, and September, which are the latter half of the regular season schedule. So the final 3 months of the 6-month schedule, it would have to be a new schedule in order to provide for fairness and also to deal with the travel logistics. So, it's conceivable that we would play primarily. We wouldn't probably go out to California and play the California teams or the East Coast teams, for example. We'd stay up and down the middle of the country. Everybody'd stay as close to home as possible. But if we played in July, August, September, we could proceed with a fairly normal, possibly expanded off season in October. Um, we had talked at one point about shifting that whole time frame back if needed and playing later into the fall and winter, um, maybe in neutral locations to deal with the weather considerations. But I think you run into start competing with a lot of other sports. You also don't know what's going to happen with the health situation and whether there's another round of health concerns in the next winter. So I think the preference is to get the second half of the season played in those 3 months of July through September, if we can do it, and then have a postseason. And man, that'd be exciting for us. There'd probably be some rule changes, maybe a designated hitter, maybe change the way extra innings work. Probably have bigger rosters. There'd be a lot of things to consider. A lot of them play into our favor. So we're trying to get as much information as we can. But I think we're all going to know here pretty soon.
Well, we definitely would love to see that happen. Obviously, there's been a lot of folks that are starved for sports and the Reds in particular. So let me ask one other question related to this. That with player contracts, obviously in your pandemic playbook, as you've said, there's nothing in there that talks about how to deal with this whole process. But how do player contracts work when you're not able to play a full season like this?
Well, that is a complicated question, and there was an agreement struck when we sent everybody home from spring training that said we don't know if we're going to play or not, but the idea was we will pay the players something, we'll give them a salary advance, so that if we to give them some money now, not knowing when we'll start. So that's been paid, and the idea was if we don't ever play, you guys will keep that. It'll become sort of a payment to you. If we do play, it'll be treated as a salary advance and we'll net it out of what you earn this year. So that was able to give the players some comfort that they would have something coming their way. When we resumed play, the concept was we would pay them the pro rata amount of their salary. So if we played half a season, they'd earn half a salary. What's being debated now is we've come to find there's almost zero chance that we'll be allowed to have fans in the ballpark, which radically changes the economics for the major league teams, as you can imagine. No parking revenue, no concessions, no merchandise, no tickets. So you're relying pretty much solely on a broadcasting revenue stream that's fixed. No matter how high the demand is for the broadcasts, that revenue doesn't go to the teams. That goes to the broadcaster. So we've got that source of revenue, and so it becomes you get into a point where it's almost better for the teams not to play than to play and pay the player salaries, and nobody wants that to be the barrier. So I think they have to try to MLB and the players union have to try to get together and figure out, given this new scenario of no fans, can we make the economic model work for everybody? You would hope so, because by playing games, we're generating revenue that otherwise doesn't exist. So it's just a matter of who gets that revenue. And obviously the postseason is a pretty important piece of that. So you need to have a legitimate regular season in order to access that postseason interest and postseason broadcast money, which I think would be tremendous given what everybody's been through this year in the absence of sports. I think we can all agree there'd be a huge pent-up demand to watch sports this summer and fall.
No doubt about it. Well, let's kind of shift gears and talk about some of the fun you had in the off season, because it was pretty spectacular. You had a variety of strengths and weaknesses you were trying to address and fill some gaps. So tell us a little bit about that exciting off season, because that obviously will be helpful to us this year.
Yeah, it all started really in 19 with we brought in the new coaching staff, and we saw the progress that we wanted to see. If you look at what happened with our pitching in 2019, the strides forward that the group took, we had the number one improvement in the major leagues in ERA. We had the number one improvement in terms of strikeouts, swing and miss. So we really felt like we put together a pitching organization that was one of the best in baseball. and we wanted to build on that success. So we went into this season really with this offseason with five primary goals we wanted to check off. One was on the offensive side, we wanted to improve our on base percentage and create more run scoring opportunities. We hit plenty of home runs last year, but we hit a lot of them with nobody on. So we just wanted to get more base running action. Second base in particular last year was a real revolving door for us. Really low on base percentage out of second base, but overall, we just didn't have enough base runners. We wanted to get better in the outfield, a little better outfield defense. We wanted to add to our quality starting pitching. No team goes deep in the postseason without 6 or 7 starting pitchers. We felt really good about our starting pitching, but felt like at least one more guy that we could plug in for 150 innings was important so that we wouldn't be dependent. If we lost a guy, we'd have some depth. Adding to the bullpen was important. And then finally, finding some guys with leadership skills, that edge, that winning experience. And I think if you look at the group of guys we brought in, we really did that. Akiyama, a defender, a high on base guy. He's had a lot of success over in Japan. Nick Castellanos, who went to the postseason with Detroit. Very good offensive player, guy that's going to raise our on base significantly. Mike Moustakas, multi-positional player. Been to the postseason with the Brewers several years in a row. Great reputation with an edge. Will impact us offensively. Wade Miley, veteran starting pitcher, great numbers over the last few years. The end of the last month of last year notwithstanding, he's had a really good run over the last few years. Been to the postseason with the Brewers, the Astros, and then Pedro Strop, who we've seen across the field. Veteran reliever out of Chicago, always had great numbers, great slider. A guy we think really can be a leader in our bullpen. He'll be the oldest guy in the bullpen, the most experienced guy in the bullpen, take some of that pressure off of Iglesias. So the 5 guys we added really checked the boxes of the things we were looking to do this offseason. I think we opened some eyes. We spent a lot of money. We made a lot of commitments. We brought in household names. It was one press conference after another, and it's been a while since we've been doing that down at Great American. And we really felt the enthusiasm going into the Reds Fest, the Winter Caravan in January, getting a lot of feedback, positive feedback from the fans.
So I guess it's possible, based on what you just talked about, that with the rescheduling, that we could be probably playing our division opponents more often, potentially. So how do we stack up, do you feel, against our division opponents this year?
Well, if you look at the projections, our division is going to be tight. We've got some very competitive teams, some good teams. The Cubs, Brewers, and Cardinals should all be competitive. Pirates a little more in that, taking a step back bucket. But the rest of the 4 teams, most all the projection sources had us within a few wins of each other. But if you averaged them out, if you looked at them on a composite basis, we were generally the favored team out of the group. If you look at what we did versus last year, the amount of impact additions, and then you look at the subtractions you lost in terms of free agency or injuries, we by far changed our prospects the most from last year to this year. So we had to catch up. We had ground to make up. We think we did on paper. Now it's a chance to see how it works. And I really felt like in spring training, what you were seeing was a winning club coming together. Guys really were gelling. When you bring 5 different personalities in from outside the organization, and they're all kind of ready for leadership type roles. They're well-known players. It's interesting to see how that jives. And I think with Votto and Suarez and Disclafani and Trevor, they really welcomed that group. And I saw a group coming together ready to compete and win this year.
When you think about in past years, it seems like there's always 1 or 2 players that really have breakout years, and they come out of nowhere and really have a lot of success. So tell us what your thoughts are in terms of maybe some folks on your roster that fit into that category.
Well, there's definitely some candidates there. I think we got a lot of young bullpen guys that are starting to come into their own. I think we're going to see some guys there really take a step forward. We don't have a lot of, the unknown rookies that are going to launch onto the scene this year. Senzel is probably, the young guy that we have the most upside potential in terms of a position player. If he can kind of crack that everyday lineup, one way or another, he's going to get a lot of at-bats, especially if we end up with a DH and we're able to add that extra offensive player on a daily basis. So I think Nick has a chance to really assert himself as an everyday guy. Akiyama will kind of get that rookie treatment. I think people are underestimating a little bit how good he can be defensively. So if he can make that adjustment offensively, I think he could be a candidate for a rookie of the year type spot. And then, in the bullpen, some of those guys that are starting to come into their own, I'd like to see, a little more from them. You got guys like Joe Kuno, who are on the edge of, came up to the big leagues last year, but really just starting to show what they could do. Ryan Hendricks was in camp with us, showing us a nice ability. And then we have a couple guys that really popped onto the radar in camp. Last year's first-round draft pick, Nick Lodolo, one of the top prospects in baseball, tall lefty. We think he can come real quick, starting pitcher. Jose Garcia had a really nice camp. He's a kid we signed out of Cuba a few years ago. Real athletic. He's really grown into his size. For shortstop, big offensive player, a lot of potential. So we got some exciting young guys. I don't know they'll impact the team. Those last two will impact the team in 2020, but certainly 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, I think that's one of the fun things over the years when we can hear about some of the prospects in the minor leagues, and then a few years later see him perform at the Reds level.
Hunter Green's the name, a first rounder from a few years ago that is feeling healthy. He had Tommy John last year, so he was going to miss part of this season. So, with everybody kind of on hold, he's able to catch up a little bit and not lose as much time relative to the competition. I still think he's going to be a real impact starting pitcher. If you can get he and Lodolo back and healthy and contributing over the next couple of years, that's going to make a big difference for a team like us.
Well, I have to tell you, Dick, it's been a pleasure talking to you today. It's we're as I mentioned, we're all starved for seeing our Reds on the field this year, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time today. Obviously, you have more than this on your schedule today with everything else going on, so I certainly appreciate the time, and we are so looking forward to seeing the team, even if it's through the television camera. Seeing them on the field this year, it should be extremely exciting.
I feel the same way, Dave. Can't wait to get the guys out there. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank you and the Rotary group for having me and for all that your organization does throughout the year. Great impact on our city and our region. So thank you for that. Happy to take the time to catch up, and couldn't be more excited about the team. So I hope we get out there and get a chance to bring home a winner.
Well, based on what we've talked about over the last couple of years, you've been putting all the pieces together, so we're looking forward to a lot of success going forward.
Thank you, sir.
And speaking of Rotary, we, as you mentioned, we have a lot of things going on to try to help those in need, whether it's locally or globally. And one of the things that we do on a global basis is that we've been trying to eradicate polio from the face of the earth for really since the late 1980s. And even though it's not necessarily present here in the States, it's still a goal of Rotary International to eradicate polio. And we've been working really hard at that, working with partners like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to do our work and eradicate that virus. But the reason I'm telling you that is that we're going to be making a donation in your name and your honor today for speaking to our club, and really appreciate you taking the time. And the donation and all the funding that we do to eradicate polio will get us hopefully very close to achieving that goal in the next couple of years. So certainly appreciate you spending time with us, Dick.
I'm honored. Thank you. I appreciate that very much.
All right. Well, I think that concludes the portion with Dick. So we'll go ahead and move into the announcements for the club and then conclude. So we don't have too many announcements today, but I want to reiterate the fact that unfortunately we're going to have to cancel our Camp Allen balloon rides this year. Due to the pandemic, of course, but the camp itself is supposed to be opening up at the end of June, and unfortunately there won't be any visitors allowed to come out there and conduct the ride. So we definitely will be bringing those back in 2021, but just wanted to reinforce that with everybody. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the nominating committee that's been formed for our next year's election. So Per our organization bylaws, the president nominee, which will become the president-elect as of July 1st of 2020, and that is Melinda Kelly, has made her at-large member selections for the nominating committee for this year. And those folks that are going to be on the committee include Allie Hubbard, Before Autry, Michael Villardo, and Owen Rassman. And they'll serve along with the other folks that are designated by the bylaws to serve, which include myself as the immediate past president, and I'll chair the committee. And then we'll have Brett LaBar, who will be our current president at that point, and then Melinda Kelly as president-elect. So if you or anyone else is interested in serving on the board of directors or nominating someone to serve, please contact any one of the folks that I just mentioned on the committee to indicate an interest by July 3rd. And we'll actually be sending an email out here shortly to remind everyone of that. It's with obvious great sadness that I wanted to share some news about our past president, Bud Dornetti, who's actually entered hospice care. Mary Dornetti has let us know that the brain scan last Friday showed that the chemo and the radiation treatments were really not successful and the tumor has returned. So she'll be bringing him home shortly, and he's going to have hospice care in place at home. So Bud is definitely aware of the diagnosis and sleeps a lot at this point in time, but he is able to communicate with Mary. And unfortunately, in-home visits are not possible at this time. But Mary has asked the Rotary family to feel free to text her with any messages, and she will actually read those to Bud to let him know that we care and love for him deeply. So Linda will actually send that out to our closed group so that everyone knows Mary's phone number and can text her accordingly. So please keep Bud, Mary, and their entire family in your thoughts and prayers. So next week's meeting is going to be a first for our club as well. It's going to be, again, it's going to be a virtual meeting, but it's going to be a joint meeting with the Rotary Club of Lexington, believe it or not. So we're going to work together with them, and we're going to have Lark Doley, who's the immediate past president of Toastmasters International, going to be speaking to us next week. So it should be quite an interesting meeting. And there was actually a relationship that was formed between Rotary and Toastmasters in the last year that I'm sure she'll report on and figure out how we can leverage both of our strengths. So looking forward to that. That'll be conducted next Thursday at the same time. And looking forward to a great meeting with the Rotary Club of Lexington. So with that, everyone, please go out and make it a great day, and meeting adjourned.